Putin is completely out of control, persistently issuing ultimatums, and no one is there to inform him otherwise. This is because the last remaining voices within the Kremlin who were able to criticize Putin's decisions have now completely disappeared. Hello there, my name is Anastasiia Husarieva. I invite you to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like, and I will share all the details of what's unfolding between the Kremlin factions, what you should anticipate from the supposed peace plan, and how everything will ultimately conclude. So, as is customary, let's proceed in due order. In the early autumn of this year, Dmitry Kozak, a long-serving associate of the Russian dictator Putin, discreetly stepped down from his position as deputy head of the presidential administration. However, prior to his resignation, he not only drafted an official letter of resignation, but also penned a personal letter to Putin, according to various sources, in which he severely condemned Russia's attack on Ukraine. According to several of Kozak's acquaintances, he was the sole high-ranking official within the Kremlin who spoke out against the war, though he did so privately, naturally. After his resignation, Kozak began traveling abroad, mainly to Israel for medical treatment, but he regularly returns to Russia. His acquaintances emphasize that this is not an escape or fear for his safety. These are purely personal circumstances. For a long time, Kozak was responsible for Ukrainian affairs in the Kremlin. Born in the Kirovohrad region, he pursued his education in Leningrad, and from the 1990s onward, he collaborated with Putin as part of the team led by Anatoly Sobchak, the former mayor of St. Petersburg. Well, that's actually where he and Putin crossed paths. After Putin assumed power, Kozak progressed through nearly all customary career stages for a bureaucrat, minister, permanent representative in the Caucasus, deputy prime minister, and deputy head of the presidential administration. And prior to the full-scale invasion, he managed communications with the leadership of the self-proclaimed LPR and DPR, and was present at the Security Council session on February 21, 2022, where the question of recognizing these pseudo-republics was addressed. And during the confidential segment of this meeting, he, despite his pro-Russian leanings, voiced opposition to the conflict's escalation with Ukraine and cautioned about the war's catastrophic consequences, including staunch Ukrainian resistance. This version was further corroborated by reports from such esteemed publications as Reuters and the New York Times. After this, Kozak was effectively removed from his responsibilities concerning Ukrainian affairs. He was allowed to keep his office and his title, but he no longer had any real work. The Kremlin entrusted Sergei Kiriyenko with the responsibility of overseeing the other nearby regions in the near abroad. Incidentally, he is also referred to as the curator overseeing the Kremlin's media sector. Various theories regarding Kozak's future emerged in the media, but following his September resignation, Kozak did not secure any new appointment. It is also noteworthy that several experts pointed out that Kozak was among the select few individuals who maintained direct access to Putin. He had direct access to Putin's office, could enter without needing a prior appointment, spoke with him informally, and often simply called him Volodya by his first name. Furthermore, Putin even paid attention to his advice, but naturally this all happened before Kozak began to voice his criticism of Russia's attack on Ukraine. And here I must immediately state that naturally Kozak's pro-Ukrainian perspectives, or even his Ukrainian birthplace, did not hold a pivotal influence in this situation. Many suggest that the primary motivation behind this criticism was precisely the fact that the ongoing conflict rendered it impossible for Kozak and his close associates to generate any substantial income. This is due to sanctions resulting from international pressure, and also because of the inability to transfer funds or bring in money, among other things. Yet, despite that, Kozak was ultimately dismissed from his position. So, let's proceed. Let's examine the current situation. Putin persists in articulating his ultimatums without cease. Putin asserts that Russia will cease military operations against Ukraine only once its armed forces withdraw from all of the Donbas territories, specifically the country's armed forces, which are currently held by the Ukrainian army. If they refuse to leave, Russia will achieve it by force. So stated the Russian dictator at a recent press conference in Kyrgyzstan. Putin further stated that Moscow purportedly desires to engage in discussions with Kyiv, though currently this is not legally feasible. He reiterated the propagandist argument that only Ukraine's Verkhovna Rada has the authority to prolong its mandate during a state of martial law, not President Zelensky. And he called signing documents with the Ukrainian leadership pointless, criticizing their supposed refusal to hold elections. Nevertheless, it's quite curious, my apologies, it's highly peculiar that such critiques or claims originate from Putin, a leader who has governed for more than 25 years and whose electoral processes were not recognized by the global community as having been conducted democratically. And it's important to note that Putin has eliminated all his rivals, either by killing them, expelling them from the country, or imprisoning them. And indeed, all those who stood in opposition to Putin were essentially just technical candidates. Therefore, to hear such accusations about elections originating from him, you must agree, seems quite peculiar. However, let's delve into the matter of the president's legitimacy, as the Ukrainian president's legitimacy has, for a considerable period now, truly been a persistent annoyance for Putin. To clarify matters completely, President Volodymyr Zelensky's legitimate 5-year term of office formally concluded on the 20th of May, 2024. Nevertheless, the conduct of presidential elections as well as parliamentary elections for the Verkhovna Rada and local self-government bodies is explicitly prohibited by Article 19 during the duration of martial law. I will now proceed to demonstrate this to you. Regarding the legal regime of martial law, the Constitution of Ukraine neither prohibits elections during this period nor explicitly requires them to take place. Furthermore, Article 108 of Ukraine's constitution, which is currently displayed on your screens and available for your review, specifies that the president shall continue to perform their responsibilities until the inauguration of a successor head of state. That is, another president who must be chosen in elections that are impossible because we are at war due to Russia's invasion and consequently under martial law. Additionally, the Constitution of Ukraine explicitly prohibits the president from independently making decisions regarding territorial changes. As Article 73 now states, a national referendum is required for this, along with a separate decision from the Verkhovna Rada. If there are any changes to the Constitution, then an updated constitutional court, properly formed through all necessary legal procedures, is also mandated. The Kremlin fully understands that absolutely no Ukrainian president, regardless of their name or identity, can ever possibly sign any document agreeing to relinquish or give up territories. Firstly, such an act would be unlawful, and secondly, it would be instantly contested, invalidated, and thus possess no legal force. The Constitution of Ukraine stipulates that any change of borders is only possible through an all-Ukrainian referendum. A Verkhovna Rada decision is also needed. It's a lengthy, complex, and politically unrealistic process, especially during wartime. Thus, Putin's ultimatum is not merely unacceptable from the outset, but rather overtly structured in such a way that Ukraine cannot possibly comply with it. In the meantime, Dmitry Peskov, Putin's press secretary, called for patience and cautioned against overstating the significance of ongoing talks regarding the proposed American peace plan. That's precisely what he conveyed to Russian propagandists, who had intimated that the parties were reportedly nearer than ever to finalizing an agreement. Peskov emphasized that there are no grounds to talk about a quick end to the war. In his opinion, both claims of a breakthrough in diplomacy and hints of a quick peace agreement are premature. The Kremlin, as usual, skirts specifics and keeps its options open for maneuvering, constantly reiterating that we simply must bide our time. Peskov also reacted separately to reports concerning phone conversations between Russian representatives, specifically Yuri Ushakov, and Donald Trump's special representative Steve Witkoff, or more accurately, the leaks of those discussions that came to light. And in these, conversations they were talking just like old friends. Furthermore, the latter, Witkoff, highly praised Putin and even offered advice on the specific approach the Russian dictator should take when conversing with Trump, ensuring the latter's contentment. He also advised Moscow on the best time to call Trump, preferably before his meeting with Zelensky, to get the American president in the right frame of mind. Witkoff additionally suggested that Ushakov devise a peace plan, following the example of what was accomplished in The Hague, a plan Trump had championed in the Middle East. The idea was simple. Moscow supposedly plants the idea of a peace plan with Trump. Trump approves it. Then both sides say they are moving towards peace. Meanwhile, the real Ukrainian concessions could remain on the Kremlin's table. Peskov insisted that the significance of these phone conversations should not be exaggerated, adding that supposedly there will be forces in various countries trying to derail any peace initiatives. Using such rhetoric, the Kremlin consistently deflects culpability from itself, redirecting accountability onto these external, self-proclaimed saboteurs. Concurrently, NBC News reported that U.S. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth allegedly warned the Ukrainian side that defeat was inevitable while promoting an early version of a peace plan. Journalists highlight that such rhetoric is likely more a manifestation of deep-seated disagreements among various factions within the White House concerning the precise manner in which this ongoing conflict should ultimately conclude. So, as you've gathered, Putin continues to issue ultimatums, conditions that are basically impossible to meet, and that Ukraine will not accept. Well, that is precisely the reason they are emerging. His declarations, suggesting either a voluntary withdrawal of the armed forces from the territory or Russia's forceful intervention, constitute an ultimatum that purposefully eliminates any possibility for future talks or concessions. Thus, the Kremlin is constructing a trap, presenting an ultimatum that Ukraine is physically and legally unable to meet. Subsequently, it attributes the non-fulfillment to Kyiv, holding us accountable for a supposed unwillingness to achieve peace. This provides the illusion of Putin being open to talks, while concurrently enabling Moscow to prolong the conflict as it sees fit, and naturally to buy time. The demands Putin presents intentionally surpass any truly realistic and achievable conditions for a settlement, rendering a conventional resolution almost unattainable. The ultimatum itself serves not as a proposal to end military actions, but as a tool to prolong the conflict. It allows the Kremlin to legitimize its aggressive actions, shift responsibility for the continuation of the war to the Ukrainian side, and simultaneously advance maximalist territorial claims. In reality, Moscow utterly lacks any desire for peace. Instead, it constructs a mere illusion of a negotiation process, setting forth conditions that are impossible to meet, thus guaranteeing itself prolonged escalation without risking a true counter-response. A number of experts are of the same opinion. They assess the situation as Putin having no incentive whatsoever to reconsider his goals. For instance, politician and political scientist Tatiana Stanovaya observes that Putin feels more confident than he ever has concerning the battlefield situation. She holds the belief that he is convinced he can patiently await Kyiv to acknowledge its inability to triumph and consequently be compelled to engage in negotiations on Russia's conditions. In his turn, Boris Bondarev, an ex-staffer from Russia's UN mission, speculates that the Kremlin, based on his assessment, will probably reject even an updated peace plan. If the initial draft, comprising 28 points, was not entirely agreeable to Putin, then this new iteration appears even less favorable. He anticipates that the next round of talks might conclude similarly to prior ones, failing because of fundamental disagreements between the involved parties. In conclusion, we can say this: the Kremlin's position remains as rigid as possible. The dictator is demanding that Ukraine meet conditions that are currently physically and legally impossible to fulfill. This is a direct indication that there will be no quick end to the war. Regrettably, the ongoing negotiation process between the United States and its allies has not yet altered this particular strategy. Amid these statements, the position of the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, was also heard. He revealed that the original peace plan contained 28 distinct provisions. However, its overall scope was later reduced, making it more streamlined and harmonious. Of course, the most challenging issues persist, specifically concerning territories and the demarcation line. Trump simply explained a border can't pass through a house or a highway. So the parties are trying to find realistic options. Additionally, according to Trump, the front is advancing in a single direction, and within a few months, Russia might forcibly capture even more territory. Thus, following his rationale, it would be wise to halt at this moment. When posed with the rhetorical question by journalists about whether Ukraine should endure the loss of an additional 50 to 60,000 people, Trump subtly suggested it would be more advantageous to consent to the proposal without delay. Regarding Ukraine's security guarantees, Donald Trump stated that European nations should take on the primary role in this matter. According to him, Europe itself ought to be significantly involved, as it holds the strongest vested interest in seeing the conflict come to an end. But Zelensky cannot agree to this, and it's not about political will or unwillingness to negotiate. He physically lacks such authority, and that is precisely why Putin's ultimatums appear not as an authentic peace offering, but as a purposely unachievable condition, solely designed to keep the war going. This is definitely not the quick end to the war that Trump talked about when promising a swift deal. Rather, these terms render the war's conclusion legally unattainable, thereby postponing any prospect of peace indefinitely. And at this precise juncture, it becomes abundantly clear that the discourse has long ceased to be about seeking a compromise, but rather about Russia's intentional strategy of protracting the conflict. This leads to the crucial question: can the European nations, in conjunction with Ukraine, effectively reach out to the United States and exert sufficient pressure on Putin to modify the conditions of this proposed plan to benefit Ukraine? And with the aim that Putin would cease presenting ultimatums and terrifying the entire world, either with the prospect of a third world war or a nuclear conflict. Currently, our negotiators have traveled to the United States of America. We will wait to see what results they bring, and we will closely observe the Kremlin's reaction to this peace plan. Furthermore, it remains to be seen whether Donald Trump will once again uphold his promise to put pressure on Russia. Please share your thoughts in the comments section. How do you envision all of this concluding? We'll discuss this together and catch you in the upcoming broadcasts. I'm Anastasiia Husarieva. Please take care and wash your hands. Bye, everyone.